go over some brief notes, just kind of how show you how to use each formula. I'm gonna do it pretty quickly, okay? Because this should be a review for most people. So interest is whenever you borrow money from the bank, you must pay an interest on that money. And interest is the money that one person, a borrower, pays to another, a lender, to use the lender's money. Or you could also put the money in the bank, and as the money sits there, it grows and gets a certain amount of interest on it. Simple interest is a formula for when it's just a basic interest problem, and it's I equals PRT. P is your principal, it's the amount you deposit in your bank account. R is your interest rate, which is your percentage. Make sure you always change that to a decimal. And T is your time and amount of years. So, for example, if you deposit $600 into your bank account, paying 7% annual interest rate. Let's get to that one. Hold on. All right, and if I was to work with this one out, you would do 600 times your 0.07, because you changed 7% to a decimal, so we move it 2 places to the left. And then we're talking about for 3 years. So we multiply all those, and you get 126. So if you leave this in the bank, you are going to end up with $126 in 3 years. All right, so if you want to figure out your future amount of like how much will be in your account after a certain period of time, you use something called the future amount formula, which is A equals P times 1 plus RT. A is your future value, P is your principal, R is your annual interest, and T is time. So assume that you deposit $2,000, so that's your P, and your rate is 2%, so that's 0.02, and T is 5. So when you look at this, the hardest thing to remember is just to make sure you do what's in parentheses first, and of course you would have to do this first because it's multiplication. So 0.02 times 5 plus 1 times 2,000, and your future value in the account will be 2,200. So if I was to ask you how much interest did this account gain in 5 years, obviously you would know that it would be 2,200 minus 2,000, because that's the amount that you put in the bank. Therefore, you gain $200 in 5 years. All right, assume that you plan to save $3,500 to take a trip in 3 years. Your bank offers a certificate of deposit, which is a CD, that pays 3% annual interest computed using simple interest. How much must you put in the CD to have the necessary money in 3 years? So you know what you're going to have at the end of the 3 years. So you know your future value. So I'm going to let that be my A, and we don't know what we want to put in, but we know we want this much after 3 years. We know our rate is 0.03, and we know my time is 3 years. So if I was to do this one, I go ahead and multiply, and you get 1.09 times P. And if you were to use some algebra skills and you want to get P by itself, what would you do? These are multiplying, so the inverse of multiply is to divide. And so 3,500 divided by 1.09 is 3,211. Okay, so this is how much you would need to put into your account if you want to make $3,500 in 3 years. So, and you can figure again how much interest that would be by just subtracting them. And this is also, you could use this. This is pretty much called your present value. You're trying to figure out the present value, so that if you wanted, you could create a new formula for that. But anyway, all right. So compound interest is the last formula for this section. So interest that is paid on principal plus previously earned interest is called compound interest. If the interest is added yearly, we say that the interest is compounded annually. Okay. So if it says compounded quarterly, that would mean every 3 months. Okay. So quarterly would be 4 times a year. We said annually was once, right? Monthly would be 12 times a year. Semi-annually, something else you may see. Semi-annually means twice a year. And another one you may see is daily, even though that never really happens, but it's 365. So now the book uses this formula. I do not use this formula. I use A equals P1 plus R over N to the NT. This is probably what you saw if you had this in high school recently. This is the same formula. The only difference is they call the compounding. This is how often it's compounded. So how often it's compounded. See, they say the amount of time it's compounded per year. They let that be M. And they go ahead and combine N as the same thing as M and T. Okay, so they just do it in one step. So let's do this one. Let's say you want to start up your own gym. The gym costs $4,500, and there's no money down and no payments for 6 months to buy the gym. You borrow $4,500 from the bank with a 12% interest rate compounded monthly. Interest will accumulate on purchase over the next months. So again, I'm going to use A equals